everybody, and welcome to Senior Susie Stamps. I'm Julia Laird, and I'm glad you're here today. I wanted to show you this little article that I found in the Stampers Sampler magazine the other day. This happens to be the November 2006 issue, and this is what happened. I decided I was going to take a little nap one day this week, and I went back to lay down for a while, and I noticed this magazine sitting on my bedside table with about 10 others. And I thought, I don't remember that issue. Let me look at that while I'm getting ready to take my nap. Well, I was thumbing through it, having a big time, when I came across this article by guest artist Lynn Metcalf, and it started on page 19. Now, I periodically do a little series using either Stampers Sampler or their later sister magazine called Take 10. These are published by Stampington and Company, and they're out of print, but they do have back issue sales. And I'll leave a link for the back issues in the description box below. But anyway, Lynn Metcalf at that time was in Keller, Texas, and she describes her cards, and I was just flipping through, enjoying her art, and then I came over here and I saw this card right here, and I thought, oh, I like that. And I remembered at that point that I had seen this paper. Remember last week when we looked through some Christmas paper looking for a scrap to use on a card? Well, I remembered seeing that this paper pack had some scraps in it that were a little larger. And I thought, well, I'll just go pull those and see what I've got. Now, what I typically do is take an 8.5 by 11 heavyweight sheet protector and put my scraps, once they're cut down to size enough that will fit in this folder, I put them in here, and then I'll leave my folder with the parent pack of paper, because it makes it much more useful to be able to pull a scrap out of the parent pack to cut if, for example, I needed a whole sheet background to use. So that's what I did. I went into this pack and I got what I needed. Let me show you the cards. And this is the card that I made. Let's just go through it right quick. I used some of the scrap paper. First of all, this is a 4 by 6 inch card, and it fits in a photo envelope, which is 4.5 by 6.5, very nicely. 4 inches by 6 inches is a very usable card size for using up paper. You can take a 12 by 12 sheet and get 6 cards out of it without even blinking an eye, and it works very, very well for using up scraps. It also works well for 6 by 6 paper to use up without any scraps left over, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I thought this card mimicked the one that Lynn Metcalf made, and this is the finished inside on that card. So I've got one for us to make, but before we get started, I want to make some less complicated scrap cards, because I think we have some new stampers in our group, and sometimes it's a little overwhelming to start with a card that's as complicated as that one is. So let's just start with this one. And again, this is trying to use up some paper scraps, and I have just taken a single piece of pattern paper, made it the focal point, and put a simple little sentiment on top of it, and an embellishment and some faux stitching around the outside. And that finishes this card beautifully, and it uses up this nice piece of paper scrap here that is a little hard to use sometimes. The thing that makes this scrap usable is the fact that it's part of the A2 size of layers. And I'll leave a link to that layer chart down below. It's over on the Facebook page. But let's make a card like this just to kind of warm up, okay? And I've got one already here. I don't remember what it looks like. Oh, yeah. And this uses some of that paper that we were just looking at. And I have an insert out of my insert notebook. I talked about that earlier this year. So that's going to go in here, and this is going to be a top fold lateral card. And these are A2 size layers. And this one is 2.5 by 3 3/4. And this one is 2 3/4 then by 4 inches. So it layers up just perfectly, and I'm going to glue those down. I'm using some Books by Hand PVA glue today. That is my go-to glue down glue. It is not expensive at all, and I get these little glue bottles and pour it up into it, and it doesn't ever clog the tip if I remember to cover the tip. If I don't happen to remember to cover the tip, I can just stick a pin down in there and it unclogs very, very easily. It's a great glue to work with, and it has a certain amount of slip time that gives you some opportunity to adjust your placement and get your borders the way you need them done. Now, on this one, I have that up on foam tape, and I think we'll do the same with this one. This one happens to have a decal edge around the solid card. I'm not going to put that on this card. I'm just going to put it up on some foam and let that be enough. You can see how quickly a little scrap card like this, using the layers, comes together, especially when you have your pattern paper do all the work for you, like this one does. And there we go. The only thing that you want to check yourself on is to make sure that your borders are even all the way around. And then I'm going to put a little 'Tis the Season on it for a sentiment for the front, and I got that out of my little notebook, so it was already done and waiting on me. And I'm going to nestle that right in between these two little trees here in the center of the focal point. And then I'm going to get my drywall tape. I promise I'll stop using drywall tape eventually, but it works so well for this particular application. I'm going to put one of the lines of fiberglass right on the edge of my card, all the way down. And then I'm going to take my black Sharpie, and this is a ultra fine point Sharpie. These are not expensive, and if my fiberglass kind of destroys the tip a little bit, I'm okay with that. I would probably not want to use one of my expensive 1 micron pens this way, but let me show you how this turns out, because for faux stitching, if you run your pen right alongside that fiberglass line that's there, and then you can pull it off, you can see how nice that stitching is that way. Much better than I can do by hand, and much quicker also, truth be told. But I want to show you this little stitching trick again using the drywall tape, because I have used it several times this year for Christmas cards, and it makes things a lot easier and quicker to get done if you're doing some faux stitching. And there's a little error there, and I'll live with that. I was running my mouth again. That's okay. We'll just come right back up in here and not worry about it. That's a little extra stitch. Stitching time. There we go. And if I'll slow down and not run my mouth so much, it works very, very well. But you know how I am. I gotta yak with y'all. Okay, so there you go. So now, the only thing I need to do is to glue this little sentiment to the inside. And if I wanted to put a little strip of paper on the inside, I could do that and finish the card to match the front then. But I'm not watching a timer on the camera, but you can tell that this card didn't take any time at all to make, and it's good to go. And it's a nice little Christmas card, if you don't notice the boo-boo. Okay, let's look at another one, because I have another way to use up some scrap paper here. And in this particular card, the base is 5 1/4 by 4, and then it's cut out of 6 by 6 paper. So I cut it at 4 inches. Well, then I have 2 inches left. Well, this is possibly the back of that paper or a strip from another piece. And this is 2 inches wide, cut to 2 5/8. Now, let me say this. If I were using the 6 by 4 inch format, I would have just cut this at 3 inches and cut this one at 4 inches and covered the whole card and had these two opposing panels and used the entire piece of paper that way. This way, I do have a teensy little scrap to go across the top here, and it works well that way. Let's make one of these, because they're easy to make and they use up some scraps very, very nicely. This paper came from Paper Wishes this year. Let me get the pack. It is called Christmas Aglow. It's a 6 by 6 pattern cardstock. It also comes in the 12 by 12 sheets, but I thought it was really pretty, and I liked the color combinations this year on this paper, so I got a pack of it. But it's still available. I don't say that very often. So, and this piece again is 4 by 5 1/4. And I'm just going to put that in as the first layer and let my pattern paper do all my work for me on this card. And then I had these two pieces left over from another card. And then I have to decide, do I want to put them that way? Do I want to put them this way? Do I want to put them that way or that way? And I'm kind of thinking I like this down in the bottom here, which means this one goes up that way. And then I have a little piece out of that paper that was part of the cut-aparts, and the Joy to You was part of the cut-aparts. And I just used a scallop circle punch and put a piece of foam on the back, and I glued this flat down to it. So that's going to go right here in the middle of this card. And actually, I think I'm going to do it this way. So, now, we'll just get that glued down, and then we're going to put it right up in the corner and make a little checkerboard-like thing with these two pieces of scrap paper. And if your two little pieces don't quite exactly match up, your centrifocal is going to cover that up. So not to worry about that. What you want to do is get your corner covered right this way. And you see right there, see how that doesn't quite match up? You'll never notice that, ever, once your little focal point goes on. And let's put that on right now. And here we go. What I want to do is make sure that this is straight across so that it doesn't look wonky, and kind of in the middle of that line right there. And there we are. And then this little piece is going to go on the inside at the top of a sentiment. Let me see if I've got some in my notebook that I can use. Where's my notebook? And it needs to be in green ink to match this Joy to You. And it needs to be going vertical. I have really used a lot of stuff out of this notebook, and I'm not sure. Oh, I have one right there. Well, isn't that nice? Yay. So I can get this card completely finished right now. And I won't have to go back later. I'm going to use this little strip here on the inside just to help pull it from the outside to the inside a little bit. And this was the cutoff from this piece. As a 6x6, I cut 4 inches. So then this is 5 1/4. So I had 3/4 of an inch left down here. And I cut it down to a 1/2 inch because I kind of like that narrower strip just a little bit on there. And then I'm going to trim this back because these little insert pieces are cut 5 to 3 3/4. And then I'm just going to glue that on down. For the inside of the card. Now I might go ahead and put some little gems on this. I'm going to switch over to my art glitter glue because it dries a little quicker and grabs faster. Let me get my gems out before I put that down. And I'm thinking we'll use red kind of down here in the corner a little bit. These are 2mm gems, so they're small, and I kind of like them. You can use more of them, and they don't overpower your card so much. There we go. And we'll see if we need any more anyplace else on the card, because certainly we have plenty of room to put them. Maybe 2 or 3 of them up in here in the holly berries. And there we are. And that card is finished, and it uses those scraps up just beautifully. Now, let's get on to the star of the show, and it's this one. I'm going to put my gems away. So let's see what we've got here. I have an overall pattern here. And you'll notice on this one that I took some drywall tape and just blended some ink through it around the outside of the edge. It just added a little more texture to this card, and I thought really brought it up a little notch there. On this one, I think, however, because of the snowflakes, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to glue this directly down on the front of this card. And again, this card is 4x6. So it's a little different format. Now in the magazine it was 5 3/4 by 7. It was a big card, which is not a card size that I usually make. This is probably my largest rectangular card that I like to make. The layers that I have all came out of that same paper pack now, remember. And this one is 4 1/4 by 3 1/4. So it's going to go on first. And this is the second layer that's going to go on that. And it's 4 by 3. But I want to cut a little decal edge with my trimmer here off of that, just to give it a little extra interest on the card. I don't want to take off much, and that's a nice thing about this Tim Holtz decal trimmer. You can cut just a little sliver if you have the right paper. It's all about the paper in this trimmer. Let's see. And we'll take another little piece off of here. And then I'm going to glue these together and then cut them apart again. So hang on. I need a little sentiment, and I'm not sure I've got one in my book to use. I don't remember. Oh yeah, I did pull one, actually. Good deal. There we go. Now, Special Holiday Hugs to You goes in. And what I want to do is to put a little piece of torn paper down here at the bottom. So that I'm going to put on next. And this is just a little scrap of paper with a torn paper edge. And it adds a little more interest to the piece. And it's less structured in the decal than the trimmer is. But what I want to do now is get my focal point glued up. And this piece is 2.5 inches square. Yeah. And this piece is 2 3/4 inches square. So I'm going to glue those together because I want to make sure before I trim this off with my decal trimmer again that I have enough room for my focal point on this top. And I'm going to go ahead and put that on now. These are really flat cards, but they've got a lot of interest and a lot of pattern paper dimension, so you don't miss a bunch of foam tape on these. But see how nice that pattern is for a focal point? Easy card to make. Now, I'm going to put this on my trimmer and just eyeball the cut. And there we are. And so now what I want to do is put my top piece on my sentiment carefully because I have very little room on this sentiment, but it will work. Just kind of right like that. So I'm going to do the bottom first. And I'm going to do that by putting a little glue right here. And I think I will use my Books by Hand glue because I'll probably need a little slip time on that. If I get my head in the way, I'm sorry. But I may have to get down here and get close with it. What I'm looking for is that this and this are the same distance on the sentiment because I'm going to trim that sentiment back a little bit. I'm going to cover up that little dot there. There, I think that looks fine. And then I'm going to do the same with the top. And I'm going to put my glue right on the very edge because I have very little wiggle room on this sentiment strip. It was so narrow. You know, I used some of the 1/2 inch pieces to make these sentiment strips when I did them earlier this year. And I think that... Let's use our grid here to see how the placement is on that. I think it needs to tweak just a little bit. Right like that. There. Now, I'm going to give that just one little second to dry and make some good contact on that glue. And then we'll trim it. With my cutter bee scissors, if I can see them. Here we are. If you don't have a pair of these cutter bee scissors, I'm going to tell you what, you need to get you a pair because they're fabulous. I can't believe I went all those years without having one. But they're wonderful. They're extremely sharp, and they're tiny enough to get in right close to something without destroying what you're working on. And they cut right down to the very tip of that point, which is very, very pointed. So now let's just see what we have here. Oh, that's looking good, isn't it? Yep, I like that. And so then this piece is a little too wide. I'm going to narrow that up a little bit. And I'm going to use my straight edge trimmer to do that. Let's see how wide that actually is to start. That is just a tiny bit shy of 1 inch. Let's do 3/4 and see if that gives us enough margin on both sides, because I'd like to put a little strip in that trim piece. Let's just see how this is going to look. And then maybe backfill with that. Almost needs a little green down here, doesn't it, instead of this piece. Let's see what we got. Wonder if we could use that piece. Let's try it. I think we'll try that and see. It may not be the perfect piece, but it may work just fine for that. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue right down the middle of this and see if I can get it where I want it. That way. And because this paper is exactly that paper there, colors are perfect. And now let's see how it looks. One thing about it, if we don't like it, it's only paper and it can go in the bin. That's the way I look at it. Yeah, I like that. And then we'll put some, maybe some gems down here and sprinkle a few up in there. Let's get it glued up. Come on. Another thing I like about this Books by Hand PVA glue is it doesn't take much, and it doesn't whelp your card paper. Like some glue, you know, whelps your cardstock a little bit, and this does not. I've been using it now for about a year, and it is my definite go-to glue now. Yes, I kind of like that. Let's glue that down. When I see an example in a card magazine, it doesn't hurt my feelings to change it. For example, on this one, I don't have the little square cubes that were on that original. That doesn't bother me. Some people, I think, have to copy things exactly, and I have never been that way. So if you're the type person that likes to copy exactly, I'm sorry that this that probably doesn't feel comfortable to you. But to me, copying somebody else's work exactly, I don't feel comfortable with that. So yeah, that's the way it works in my studio. I'm going to put some little dots here. There we are. And now there's the color thing, because that is not really red. That tree is kind of more of a rusty like color. So I think we'll just use some green down here. That's not an exact match, but it's close enough. And then we'll add some up above as well. And when I set those glue dots, I did this one and that one, and then put it in the middle of the two, in case you didn't notice that. I'm going to go right back in on top of some of these little snowflakes that are here and put my little 2mm gems in on top of that. That way they have kind of a purpose for being there. And they don't look like they're just hanging out in the wind. So there's the outside of the card. Now, for the inside, this is not proportional, and so we want to cut that down. And the piece is 5 inches, so it needs to be 3 by 5. Let's see if we can get there with the sentiment. I think we can. And that makes this piece proportional to the card itself. And I do have a little strip that was left over here. I'm going to put that on. And I can put that on with or glitter glue or any kind of glue. And it'll come right up here like this and be trimmed off. I'm going to switch out the glue because I may have to wiggle this just a touch. But you can see that it doesn't take much glue at all on this type of thing, especially when it's going on the inside, because you just don't have any stress on your inside of your cards. You don't need to waste a lot of glue on that. Now I do need to pull that down just a touch. And there we go. Has a nice even border all the way around. And it looks like a nice little finished card that way. So, there we are. Let me show you the cards from today. And I hope you enjoyed them. Let me get some stuff out of here. So, here's some ideas on how to use your pattern paper as your focal point and entirely make your card from pattern paper with a few little extra embellishments and techniques that you might need to know about, and completely use up your scraps. So, have a great day, and I'll see you again next week. Bye, y'all.